Welcome or welcome back. It's Sue with Everyday Artisan again. And in this video, we're going to finally start constructing our Alabama Chanin swing skirt. I have sewn and cut all of my Magdalena design on my swing skirt, and now it's time to attach the panels. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to go to as many of the stitch group meetings as I would like. Summer's been a little crazy. So I wanted to put this video out for those of you in the group who haven't started construction yet. Maybe you could use these tips as well. All right, the first tip is when you're attaching your panels, you want to make sure that the two panels you're putting next to each other either go together if that's what you want, or make it look random if you'd prefer. In this particular case, you can see that this shape is actually the same as this shape. Like if I were to lay this right like that, it would be the same stencil. And I didn't want that to happen right next to each other. I thought that would look kind of strange. So I went for a more random pattern. And I've actually already attached two panels together here and two panels together here. I've already gotten a good start at it. So you can see now that looks more random. As does that one. Here was one of these big shapes. So the way they airbrushed the skirt, they had three of this big shape on the bottom, which makes sense. It's the largest shape. It belongs on the bottom of the skirt. But I definitely had to do a little thinking before I even attached them to make sure they lined up the way I wanted them to. Okay, so now that I've figured out the placement of each of the panels, the next question is, do you want your seams on the wrong side of the fabric, or do you want your seams on the right side? And then do you want to fell your seams, which I did in this case. I went back over the seam after I seamed it once and gave an additional row of stitching to help it lay flat. I really liked the felled look. So that is what I did. So in order to continue with what I've been doing, where my seams are going to be in the wrong side, you place your right sides together and line them up the best you can. And oftentimes the fabric, because this is cotton jersey, it does a lot of stretching while you're stitching, and so it's never quite going to line up. But what the trick for that is, for Alabama Chanin, it's called pinning to the middle. So you want to pin your outside edges, line those up first, and then kind of work your way towards the middle, and in doing so, kind of manipulate the fabric as much as you can so it would lay flat. Again, I always like to start on the edge that is going to be the raw edge, that seam, because this top is going to be under a waistband. And I'll start there. And then I'll line up the tops. Kind of give it a little shake. So I need to creep it up a little. So the fabric does a really good job of sticking together, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. So then I'll come here, probably about 6 inches down. See if I need to do any additional lining up. And that is pinning towards the middle. And then if you do have any, extra little fabrics, it does get caught up in the stitches, And because this is not a completely smooth garment to begin with, you don't even notice. All right, the next thing to do is to get started stitching. You're definitely going to want to use button craft thread for the construction of your garment. You may have just used embroidery floss or something else in the design, but you definitely want the button craft thread when it comes time to construction. Now, hopefully you saw me loving my thread. So this is going to be a beautiful garment. I'm going to stitch my seams straight. All my stitches are hopefully going to be not the same size, but similar. And hopefully this won't take me forever on camera to thread my needle. And as strange as this sounds, I like to put something white behind it because that helps me see, although that's not white enough. Oh, I had it and then I pulled it out. Actually, I said thread my needle. I'm supposed to needle my thread. But I'm going to stop the video because I'm not going to make you watch me try this 10 times. Okay, finally got it threaded. Needed a little more light. Okay, so I'm doubled the thread. I'm continuing to love it and double knotted it at the end. And the first thing you want to do is wrap your thread. So you don't just want to start stitching up and down. You want to, and I moved this down a little to be able to get to the end. You want to be about 1/4 of an inch in. And so go through one time and come up, then go back down and around to that same spot and come up again, wrapping the thread around the top of your skirt or bottom if you're starting on the bottom. But you can hopefully see that I've wrapped around this edge of the skirt. And then you just go ahead and start your way down 1/4 of an inch as you go. Here, I'll do a couple stitches with you because I also want to show you another thing I tend to do. Not so much on the reverse applique, which this is, where I've cut out the painted stenciled part, but on the negative reverse, which is the shirt I'm wearing right now, when you cut out the non-painted part and leave the painted design, there's a lot of edges. And so I'm always trying to make sure that I catch the edges the way I want to in the seam. So like even right now, I'm 6 stitches in, but I will take it and open it up and make sure I've caught everything. Like look, right here is a piece that I'm about to come to. So I would hate to stitch that together and have this piece hanging out, which I'm not sure if you can see that from this far away. This little piece. So I'm going to make sure it's tucked in there really good before I continue my stitching. All right, let's make our way down the end. I know, I'm loving these time-lapse videos a little too much. But when you work as long as I do at this stitching, it's sometimes hard to see your progress. So these time-lapse videos are pretty cool. One other thing I do want to mention is to make sure you keep your tension tight and steady. You don't want your fabric bunching up any places. Okay, I tried to gauge the length of my thread, and I actually made it a little longer than is suggested because I wanted to make sure I had enough left over to be able to wrap and even take a couple stitches up, which I do in order to make sure my tail doesn't land along the bottom edge. So I just wanted to stop and make sure I showed you guys that you need to wrap both the bottom and the top edges, or I should probably say the beginning and the ending edges, because sometimes there's not necessarily a bottom or a top. Okay, so it's actually kind of interesting because there is no shape here at the bottom. So I'm just doing one layer, so it feels kind of flimsy. Oh, somebody's ready for her walk. So I've finished here, but I'm going to wrap it around, come back up where I was, and have that wrapped edge. And then, like I said, I bring it up a few stitches before I knot it off. And this is just my personal preference, to make sure that when I do knot it off, I guess she's okay with just laying down next to me. Just wanted me to know she was coming over. So I'll knot it off, and then I want to make sure I can cut it so that it doesn't hang over the edge. All right, so that's step one for my seams. Again, I fell my seams, so there's going to be a second step. Let's take a look. Pretty good, but you can kind of see, I think, you can kind of see how this one's loose and doesn't lay flat as compared to my felled seam over here. You can hardly see it, but this sticks up. Gosh, this is gonna be tricky because I'm in the middle of such a big wide swath. But give me a second to thread another needle and I'll be right back. Okay, this is gonna be a little tricky because it's so large now, but if you can see, I kind of folded it back a few times to make it so that it's easier to get to my seam. And for me, you're definitely going to want to make sure your seams, like if I'm doing a shirt, I try to seam them both in the same direction towards the back. Because there are 4 different seams on this, you could either do 2 seams to the back, or you could do seams going this way like that or that, depending on your preference. For me, I definitely have a way I like to do it. I like to take the fabric from the wrong side. There's your 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch of a seam in there, and then I like to do it where I pull it towards me. But again, you're going to want to wrap your seam, even for your felled seam. This time it's harder because this time I'm going through 4 layers of fabric. So these first couple stitches, I just make sure I get it right before I can even try to go along stitching. Make sure it's pulled plenty tight. All right, and now we just, again, go all the way down the seam with another row of stitches to help the seam lay flatter. Oh, I did that wrong. pay attention to what you're doing. I wrapped it again. I came up from the bottom when I should have come down from the top, or one or the other. Okay, well, that's felling your seam. I'm gonna go ahead and stitch the other side and fell that seam, and I'll show you when I've got that done, and then all that will be left to do is to attach the waistband. And here we go. I finally finished. I sewed my 2 seams together and felled both seams, and now I have the body of my skirt together. All that's left to do is to add the waistband, and I'm loving it. It's gonna look great with all the black tops that I have, and I have a lot of black shoes. I will say I set myself up for a challenge by sewing 2 panels together and then attaching the 2 panels to the 2 panels, because when it came down to felling, I like to grab it, and it was really hard to grab through 2 panels worth of fabric. I hadn't done that before. I did it this time because I wanted to really focus on matching up the panels that I wanted matched up. So I matched up the 2 first, and then the other 2 without thinking with the challenge I was setting myself up for. So normally I just do 1 panel, add a panel, add a panel, add that last panel. That last panel is always going to be tough when you're felling that last seam, but totally worth it. And I will make another video of attaching the waistband, and then I'll have a skirt and be finished, which is always exciting when you finish a project and you finally get a chance to wear it. So thanks for coming along with me and joining in, and please like and subscribe, and now it's time to start thinking about what project comes after this. All right, thanks.